Welcome back to Toffee Blues, your source for all things Everton. I'm Ollie Hayes, and today I'm delighted to say that I'm giving you the scout report for Jack Grealish. Delighted to say I'm joined with Amos Murphy of the City Ramble. Amos, welcome back to the show. How are you doing?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. It is the second recording. The last one didn't necessarily go to fruition, did it? It was about Kyle Walker, and obviously he's gone to a different football club. So fingers crossed, I'm not a bad luck charm for all you toffees.
I was about to say that, yeah, it seemed to be a bad luck charm. The second we recorded that, the news actually broke, I think, that evening that we were going for Kenny Tete, and then Kyle Walker ended up at Burnley that week. But fingers crossed that won't happen, and we will get Jack Grealish over the line. That should be here in the next 24, 48 hours, fingers crossed. But again, we already know so much about Jack Grealish, don't we, as Premier League fans? But let's start at the start. Tell me the basics of his Man City career. How's it gone for him in a City shirt?
Divisive, I think is the first word off the block. He is certainly, in my lifetime, I'd say, been the most high profile City player that has split opinion. And I'd say, just off the top of my head, in terms of my social group, friends, social media, whatnot, I'd say it's straight down the middle. I'd say one in every two City fans is a fan. I'd say one in every two City fans would call his time at the club a failure. For me, I'm very much. Ironically, maybe not in that split. I do see both sides, but I fall more towards the side of it. It went well. It was good at times. I think anyone who plays a crucial part in a football club winning the treble, not the treble that your noisy-ish neighbours like to claim about the actual treble. I think you have to sort of hold them in the highest regards, and a lot of his City career has been shadowed by number files, almost saying he's not got this amount of goals, he's not got this amount of assists. That was never Grealish.
Yeah.
Even his best at Villa, that was never Grealish. So yeah, it's certainly split opinion, but he's still got plenty left to give, and I think Everton fans have every right to get absolutely delighted about this.
Good, good. I mean, you talk about number files, and there's numbers that are attributed to Jack Grealish whenever you're talking about him. You have to talk about the £100 million fee.
Yeah.
157 games for Manchester City, 17 goals, 23 assists. But I agree with you. I don't think he was ever a numbers man. You look at his time at Aston Villa, you look at his time, obviously, at Manchester City. He's never really pumping in 10 goals, 10 assists consistently every season. That's just not the type of player he is. But he's this maverick type player, I see it. And for £100 million, he's always going to have that hanging over him. If he was a £50 million player, I think a lot of people would maybe say his time was more of a success in Manchester City. But with that £100 million fee, it's always going to have that looming over him, isn't it?
And look, I'm not going to sit here and say it was necessarily a out and out success because if you spend 100 million quid on a player in 2021 and 4 years later they're leaving on loan, I'm going to go out there and say already, I don't think there's a cat in hell's chance City get a fee for him. That
Mm.
rumored option to buy a 50 million quid, I don't know why that's even there.
Yeah.
It's chocolate teapot sort of territory there. Being said, there were times where it was underwhelming, but there were times where it was great. And yeah, I think the £100 million thing certainly pressured him
Mm.
because one of the greatest things about Jack Grealish, and in a way it's a strength, in a way it's a flaw, is how almost normal he is. And we've all seen it with the social media clips of him stumbling about, having one
Mm.
too many drinks and whatnot. He is a normal lad, and that does come across not only off the pitch but on the pitch as well. And I do feel like maybe he wasn't built to be this sort of £100 million big money superstar
Mm.
signing. Ironically, I don't think he's got that kind of ego to sort of shake it off and almost take it in its stride. So I think maybe at the start he had that bit of a swagger about him, but it definitely, as the doubt started to come from elsewhere, it definitely I think played a part. And he managed to, in this magical 6 month spell in 2023, shake it off and, live up to the hype and look like the player that we all expected him to become and be. And then again, you go from that sort of high of helping your football club, your team, your teammates and whatnot achieve the pinnacle in
Yeah.
football. He always struggled to get back on that, sort of back down from that. And I think that's kind of proved to be the end of him, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it's been so up and down, hasn't it, for Jack Grealish at Manchester City? That's probably the biggest thing you'd say with his time at Manchester City. It's been so the highs have been very high. You look at the Champions League winning season and obviously the treble winning season, but then the lows of him getting sort of ostracised from the Club World Cup side this summer. And obviously we'll get onto that, but going back to the start of this summer, obviously you look at the Club World Cup, and he was obviously a name that was omitted from the list there. There was rumours right at the start of the summer, and there's been rumours swirling all summer long with Jack Grealish to Everton. That's been the sort of name that's been linked the most to Jack Grealish. What were yours and certainly the Manchester City fans' thoughts of the rumours when they first came out?
Yeah, interesting question because I think the die was almost cast in that final game of the season. City
Mhm.
played Fulham and he was left out of the squad entirely. And a week before that, City had played Crystal Palace in the FA Cup. They were obviously chasing a goal for pretty much the majority of the game.
Yeah,
He doesn't come on at all. Instead, a young teenager, Claudio Echeverri, makes his first team debut, which,
yeah,
is still absolutely mind-boggling to me at the time. But anyway, the final nail in the coffin was certainly the Club World Cup. And I think by that point, people were just expecting him to move. And it did feel like, maybe a trip abroad.
mm,
Saudi's been mentioned. You know, I'm going to put it out there. I'm not quite sure lifestyle wise. The money might be great, but I'm not sure lifestyle wise a trip to the Saudi Pro League would have been up Grealish's street. And even still, I feel like he's got a point to prove in Premier League football. It's what he's known for the majority of his career, and Everton makes sense on so many levels
mm,
because they are, or at least they should be. Obviously, it's been a couple of rough years down towards the bottom of the table, but they're an established part of that Premier League middle class, almost, always looking to make that step forward, becoming increasingly difficult with PSR and whatnot. So it's a move that makes sense from a sporting point of view, but also his young family in the
yeah.
northwest, and I think that's been a big driving part that almost maybe helped Everton more than anything, really, because he's not going to have to be unsettled. And going back to the on the pitch stuff, I think that can really work in his favour. The fact it is a plug and play almost. All that's changing basically is the different shade of blue. So I think that will certainly help Jack Grealish settle down into the dressing room and whatnot. And obviously his reputation goes before him, both in a good and a bad way. So I don't think he's not going to be sort of needing time to sort of find his feet. He's going to walk in that dressing room. Yes, eyes will be on him, but I feel like he's possibly going to be up to this challenge. So yeah, exciting.
Yeah, true. And also, you're talking about walking into that dressing room. He's got the likes of Jordan Pickford, who he obviously knows from international duty, which is going to help him massively. You've got the sort of seasoned veterans like James Tarkowski, but then also a experienced head on young shoulders with Jared Branthwaite. I think players like that will help Jack Grealish to sort of flourish. But you mentioned as well that it's sort of a plug and play type player with Grealish coming to Everton. It's just a different shade of blue. And, maybe if you're looking at his time in Manchester City, Pep is maybe a little bit more regimented with his play and how he sort of sets up his teams. Do you think Pep Guardiola really got the best out of Pep Guardiola? Do you think Pep Guardiola really got the best out of Jack Grealish during his time at Manchester City, or do you think he was maybe sort of stunned too much by that regimented system that Pep really likes to play?
Yeah, look, I don't sort of I understand why that narrative has come about with his time at City, because if you just tune into a regular match day, you might see him pick the ball up on the left hand side, and you might see him make a couple of short passes, and
Mm.
obviously you go back to the clips of him at Aston Villa, and he's dancing through defenders, and he almost had the freedom of that middle of the park.
Yeah,
That was never going to be the case at City, regardless, because De Bruyne, David Silva, no, sorry, he wouldn't have played with David Silva, but De Bruyne, even at times Phil Foden,
yeah,
those creative outlets, Ilkay Gundogan playing centrally as well. I do. I understand why that's the case, but I feel like it is a little bit more nuanced when you look at him, because it's never it's never been a quality issue with Jack Grealish. Pep Guardiola's banged on about this so often when he's been asked, and it got, you could tell it was getting to him at the end of last season. He was getting almost fed up being asked, "Where's Jack? Where's Jack?
yeah,
Where's Jack?" And he's always said, "Look, when Grealish is there, and I think he means, fitness wise and also mentally as
yeah.
well. He isn't maybe not first name on the team sheet, but you saw what he was able to do when he was switched on in 2023.
Mm.
Fantastic running, and even at times during the 2024 Premier League win, and even say that in his first season as well, he had his moments.
Yeah.
It's never been a quality issue. I just feel like my theory anyway, it's been an application issue, and I do wonder if the big stage, the big club, the bright lights maybe got the better of him at times. Because, like I said,
Yeah,
go back to before, he's a normal lad. So I can understand why it might look like the tactics of, I think
yeah,
the phrase is coached it out of him and whatnot.
yeah.
Maybe they have, I don't know, but I think like, Guardiola's always sang his praises from a footballing point of view. For me anyway, it just feels like it was elsewhere that it didn't quite click.
Yeah, maybe just the sort of coming to Everton and the pressure off his shoulders a little bit. You mentioned as well, he's just a normal lad. I keep bringing it up, that £100 million fee hanging over him. That sort of weight off his shoulders coming to Everton might help him a bit. But focusing now on this summer and the Club World Cup, and obviously his emission from that squad going over to America, what were yours and Manchester City fans' thoughts on his exclusion? Do you think it was fair? Do you think it was on the horizon, or do you think it was, not really the right thing to do?
I'd say looking back, it's more surprising than it probably was at the time because,
Mm.
like I said, he'd just been left out of the matchday squad for Fulham, and it came around so quickly. It was only like 2 weeks or so later, and it felt like this one was going to move really quickly. And that Grealish is done. Early on in the transfer window, he'd be signed, sealed, delivered elsewhere. The weird part about it was when City returned to training about 2 weeks ago, and he was there and he was in training. And there was a point, I think there was a news report, it might have been the Independent saying Grealish and Pep spoke at Oasis when they were both there at Heaton Park and they had this sort of, heart to heart. And Grealish came away from it thinking maybe his future is at City. Literally a little bit like the Kyle Walker news we were speaking about before. 24 hours, 48 hours later, you're getting the nailed on stories that he's going out. So I think looking back on it, it was maybe a bit weirder that he didn't go because it
Mm.
took so long for this transfer to really
Yeah.
transpire. Whether or not there was something in the pipeline that didn't come off, Napoli were mentioned. I think Fenerbahce tried to speak to him. I don't know, but I think at the time there wasn't that many surprises just because of it felt like the writing was on the wall.
Right.
Obviously, going back to it, I'm sure he could have probably. I'm sure if he was in the squad, he was in the squad. It wouldn't have been too much of a big deal. But yeah, yeah, interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It was one that's been rumbling all summer, and obviously we all thought that Jack Grealish was leaving. Where he was going to go was obviously the mystery, and obviously it
Mm,
is Everton that he's ended up at. But yeah, you mentioned Fenerbahce were linked. I think Napoli were linked. So yeah, it was interesting. I remember seeing a thing when City came back to training, seeing that Jack Grealish was in
yeah.
training and went back. I was like, what? I just didn't understand it. I thought it was nailed on that he was leaving, but obviously it has transpired that he is leaving the club and he's leaving on loan. But focusing now, obviously he has left the club. He's joined Everton on loan for the season. What's his best position? What can we expect from him in terms of his positional play? Is he best on the wing? Is he best as number 10? Can he play on both sides? What are we to expect from him this season?
I think it's certainly down the middle, really, which is obviously not somewhere we saw him a lot at City. Although last season, his very fleeting stints in the City team, a lot of them did come down the middle, and
Mm.
part of it was injury related in terms of players not being available. But at the same time, it was weird. He played so well, and then like the next week he'd just be out of the team, which I guess is sort of you live and die by the Guardiola sword, kind
Mm.
of that's what tends to happen. But I think of course he can. He is adept coming in on that off that left hand side. But in terms of Everton, I think David Moyes would be absolutely foolish not to deploy that because that's that was Jack Grealish at Villa. That was give him the ball, make something happen. And you look at some of Everton's attackers now. There's a certain excitement, there's a certain buzz around, especially in the forward department. I feel like he could glue a lot of those pieces together. And obviously, looking a bit further down, back towards the goal as well. It is a nice little gel in terms of midfield and combining those areas of the pitch as well. So I think, I'd be stunned. I'd be stunned if we exclusively see him on the left wing because I
Yeah.
feel like he is kind of tailor made for David Moyes in that number 10 role.
Yeah, I completely agree with you about the glue. You look at the likes of Illiman and Jai, Kane and Dewsbury Hall, who's obviously just joined from Chelsea. I think they can massively link up and
Yeah.
do really well in terms of link up play in the final third. But also you look at Idrissa Gana Gueye as well. Idrissa Gana Gueye
Mm.
is this sort of battering ram, box to box midfielder who's really good at winning the ball. If he gets the ball to Jack Grealish consistently, I think they're going to have a lot of joy, linking up there. Another question I've got is how well does he link up with the fullback? Obviously, we've just signed Adam Asnou from Bayern Munich. Obviously, he's a reported left back, can't really play on the right hand side. We haven't really got an out and out right back at the moment. We've got Nathan Patterson, who isn't really flourishing in terms of his development. We play Jake O'Brien there, who's pretty much a centre half, being a makeshift right back. How well does Jack Grealish link up with his potential fullback partner?
It's ironic, really, because the best season for Jack Grealish in terms of system to have had success at City is probably the upcoming one because City have just signed Ryan Nouri, who is obviously very much that out and out left back. In his first season at the club, it was Cancelo who was
Yeah.
on that flank. Then it was, for the most part, Nathan Ake, and then it was Josko Gvardiol. So it's either a right back makeshift left back or two left-sided centre halves playing left
Mm.
back, and he never that's I think kind of the reason a lot of people see those clips of him passing it backwards, or why that maybe stuck a little bit, was because, look, of course, you want your £100 million forward to be able to, stand on the head, do cartwheels, and Maradona pass people and all that lovely business. But at the end of the day, he's only one player, and if you're getting
Yeah.
doubled up on, it's the same argument with Jeremy Doku at the moment as well. I feel like if you add Ryan Nouri into Jack Grealish's sphere, it certainly helps because it's
Mm.
another player occupying the space. So yeah, I feel like he has that awareness, and this might sound ridiculous because City have had so many intelligent footballers over the last decade or so, but genuinely he's up there with the most aware on a football pitch
Wow.
that I can remember watching, especially when he was on song. Just seem to know you're born with it, basically.
Yeah.
I think anyone who's played football will know sort of that it is one of those skills where you either have it or you just don't, and it is that awareness that I feel like will get Everton fans off their seats
Yeah.
because he does, he can put on a show, and when it's clicking, it clicks fantastically. So yeah, fullbacks, midfield, he especially in the middle as well. He has got this sort of great awareness of where everything is and what's going on around him. So yeah, I'm hoping I'm not going to jinx him because if he comes and he stinks the gaff out, then it's on my head. But I feel like this is just a really good move for both parties, really.
Good. I mean, it's something that we've not seen for so long. I think Iliman and Jai is the first player that we've had
Yeah.
to get us off our seats in so long. I'm thinking back, maybe like when I was younger, Kevin Morales or even Stephen Pienaar, they were the type of players that would get us off our seats. But Iliman and Jai is the first one that we've had really since those kind of players back in the day that can get us off our seats. And Jack Grealish is another one of those players. But now, if we had to nail it down to one strength and one weakness, what would you give us his biggest strength and sort of his biggest weakness in his game? What are them two?
Good question. I'd say his biggest strength, a little bit like I touched on there, would definitely be the match intelligence, the football intelligence, and I don't necessarily mean it in a Xavi way, or like a Rodri way, where they are dictating, they're getting the ball, they're passing it off, the one in it back. But he's really adept at knowing when to sort of increase the tempo or slow it down a little bit. So I City had so much success with him in 2023 when it was a little bit more of a rigid system because he could set that tempo from the wide, and it was like having a midfielder out on the wing, which is kind of the blueprint Guardiola was going for. And I'd say that would certainly go down as his strengths. Weaknesses, depending on how it goes, sometimes availability. In terms of he has over the last, I'd say, 2 seasons picked up a few more niggles than you would have wanted, and
Right.
it's that was the frustrating part. He'd come back in, he'd look great a week later, going off muscle injury or whatever. I'd say another one, just a minor one, especially when he's coming in off the left. So many of his shots got blocked. It almost became a running joke at the same time. So I don't think that's something. Well, I feel like that's something that will probably transpire because maybe takes half a second too long to get a shot away,
Right.
but maybe the team's Everton or the way Everton are setting up might have that little bit more time on the ball. I don't know. Maybe it's a sort of a byproduct of how teams are setting up against City, but I'd say that's something to watch out for.
Well, fair enough, yeah. I mean, sort of focusing now on City, and obviously I'm not too sure how you've done in pre-season. Obviously getting knocked out of the Club World Cup was not ideal. But sort of, are you disappointed to see Jack Grealish leave? Do you think it leaves you a little bit short, or obviously with the signings you've made, you've obviously got Jeremy Doku in there, Savinho, wherever he ends up this season, he might still be at Manchester City, he might obviously go to Tottenham. Do you think you're a little bit short? Are you disappointed to see Jack Grealish leave, or do you think it was the right time for him to move on?
Yeah, I'd say it's definitely a mixture. I'm disappointed from a human level and a
Mm,
personal level because, like I said, and maybe it's the bias and it's the treble tax and whatnot, but I think just when it clicked, like I say, when it clicked, it was magical, and I don't feel like City had that. We didn't see that long enough, and you could maybe say that about a few of the players from that squad. But I do subscribe to the thinking, even as one of these biggest supporters and defenders, that it definitely was the right time, not only for
mm,
City but for him himself.
yeah.
You know, World Cup year, any last remaining hopes, you need to be playing. And even when the rumours were going around that he might stay, he might stick around and whatnot, it felt like even if he was going to be at City, it would only be in a bit part role. And
Mm,
that's not fair on anyone,
yeah.
basically. He's 29 years old. Obviously turns 30 in September, so physically that might be something to watch out for. But I don't think he was never sort of pace power sort of
Yeah.
player anyway. There's always that finesse about him, so I don't think he's going to slow down too much. But I think he's got to sort of try and eke out the last remaining bits of his career in terms of loving football. He's won the trophies now. I don't think anyone who makes the argument that it was a mistake to go to City,
Mm,
he'll look back in 25 years' time and he'll be a Champions League winner and he'll have
yeah.
3 Premier League titles or whatever it worked out to be. So that I don't subscribe to that argument, but I think he has to almost for himself just to be
Mm.
like, yeah, let me fall back in love with football again. And who knows where that will take him and slash or Everton.
Good. Well, fingers crossed he does. But just before we wrap up, have you got anything else that you want to say on Grealish? Anything that you didn't get a chance to mention? And how big of a signing do you think this actually is for Everton? Have we got the right to be very, very excited, which me included, a lot of Evertonians have been today?
I think absolutely. I mean, it's an exciting time for Everton themselves. Obviously, new stadium, moving into that. I think it almost needs and it almost deserves a marquee player like Jack Grealish
Mm,
to. I know fans don't need any sort of encouragement to turn up and support the team, but it just adds that extra bit of sparkle to what should be, will be a historic season for Everton.
yeah.
Grealish as the person, I mean, I can't sort of say enough in terms of that. Just there's so many videos of him walking in, and footballers are footballers, they're in their own zone, and I'm not begrudging anyone for sort of how they behave if they're
Mm,
getting ready for a match and whatnot. But he'd always be saying hello to the kids or the ball boys or whatever it might be. He spoke at length about his family. I think one of his sisters has cerebral palsy, and he's done so. Highlighted issues like that.
mm,
He's even going down to something more trivial like sticking money behind the bar when he was in a pub once. Like I said, he is a human, a real sort of authentic human.
yeah.
And without going over the top cliche, I do think it will suit a club like Everton
Yeah.
because I think the fans will, if it clicks, absolutely love him. And I can't, it sounds daft when you're watching a player leave and you're like, no, you want them to succeed
Mm,
because it must have failed for a reason. But I think I speak for so many City fans here where if he's ripping it up, yeah, there'll be a tinge of regret. But I think most City fans will be really buzzing for him.
that's good. I mean, I was literally just about to say, as you were saying, that he'll fit in really well in a club like Everton because,
Yeah.
as you said, if he's tearing it up on the pitch, but he's just a likable fella off the pitch, that takes really well with Evertonians. So, fingers crossed it
Just
really
keep him away from
transpires.
Concert Square, and I think you'll be
I
fine.
think we'll have to do that maybe for the first 3 months, just to try and
Yeah.
get a little bit of bang for our buck for our loan. But Amos, thank you very much for telling us all about Jack Grealish today. It's been absolutely fantastic to hear your thoughts and best of luck for the season. And fingers crossed we can get the best out of Jack Grealish.
Yeah, absolutely. Best of luck, guys.
Well, that's been all from us today on the Toffee Blues for the Jack Grealish Scout Report. Let me know your thoughts, Blues, in the comments. It seems though we have the right to be excited for this one, but let me know your thoughts in the comments. But that is all from me today. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and I'll speak to you soon.